In the lush wetlands of the Okavango Delta Conservation Reserve in Botswana, where wild hippopotamus pods bask lazily in the murky waters, a tiny life was struggling into the world. Under the brilliant golden sunlight reflecting off the delta's waterways, an elderly female hippo named Zara gave birth a month early. Contrary to all predictions, not one but two hippo calves were born simultaneously. All Okavango Delta staff waited anxiously, knowing that premature birth could lead to serious consequences. The first hippo calf was born strong and healthy, a female weighing about 25 kilos as usual. Promising start. But when the second offspring appeared, silence fell over the medical team and hippo care staff. A male, incredibly small, he weighed only 5 kilos, 1/5 compared to his sibling. In the world of river giants, this number was almost synonymous with a death sentence. Marcus Reynolds, the 60-year-old reserve manager with 35 years of experience caring for hippos, stared at the tiny creature lying on the muddy riverbank with undisguised amazement. His silver hair reflected the sunlight, the wrinkles on his face carved deep by time and long years working under the harsh African sun. His rough and calloused hands, hands that had once treated wounds for hippos, crocodiles, and countless other aquatic animals, now trembled as he gently touched the newborn hippo. "In my entire career," he whispered, "I've never seen a hippo newborn so small." Around Marcus, colleagues exchanged glances with pessimistic eyes. They all knew what would happen in nature. Offspring too small, too weak, usually didn't survive. That wasn't cruelty, but the harsh law of survival. And indeed, even Zara, the mother hippo, seemed to understand this. After being exhausted from giving birth, Zara struggled to stand up, gently pushed the tiny baby away with her massive snout, and focused on caring for the healthier offspring. Robert Quincade, the reserve director, a practical and tough man with 25 years of experience managing wildlife conservation areas, placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. His face held compassion, but his voice was unwavering. "I'm afraid we have to let nature decide, Marcus. This is the law of nature. We can't intervene in every case." Marcus understood clearly what Robert was saying. That was exactly the principle he had followed and taught to young staff for many years. Don't interfere with natural law. Don't let emotions influence professional decisions. But when Marcus knelt down and looked into the tiny creature's dark eyes, something in his heart stirred. Those eyes, though dim and weak, still shone with a strong will to live, an undeniable tenacity. And in that moment, something within Marcus, perhaps pain from the past or a sense of a second chance, awakened. He slowly stood up, his tall figure becoming more upright, his broad shoulders carrying a new responsibility. "I'll take him home," he declared, his voice without hesitation. "I'll raise him myself." Silence enveloped them. Then whispers began to spread among the staff. Marcus Reynolds, the one who always strictly adhered to the rule of non-interference with nature, who always warned young colleagues about the risk of emotional attachment to animals, was now the one breaking his own rule. Robert looked at Marcus with amazement and skepticism. "Marcus, what are you saying? You know his chances of survival are almost zero. Even if we take him to the best hippo care center in Africa, they would say the same thing." But Marcus had decided. With utmost care, he gently wrapped the small hippo in a soft, moistened blanket that had been warmed. Every movement was calculated, every fold of the blanket arranged to provide warmth and support for the tiny, fragile body while keeping his sensitive skin properly hydrated. Marcus's house was located at the edge of the conservation reserve. A simple wooden house with a large courtyard and a big greenhouse behind it that he used to grow African aquatic plants and medicinal herbs. That was where he decided to create a temporary home for the hippo calf. In the warm greenhouse, he placed soft blankets, waterproof padding, and set up both a heating system to maintain stable temperature and a shallow pool with temperature-controlled water, essential for a hippo's sensitive skin. The small hippo, whom he named Tumalo, meaning faith in Setswana, lay motionless on the blanket, body temperature dropping rapidly, breathing weakly. Marcus knew the first 72 hours would decide everything. With knowledge accumulated over years working with aquatic mammals and veterinary medical books he had studied, Marcus prepared a special milk formula for hippo calves, supplemented with fish oil to provide energy and a special mixture of essential vitamins and minerals. Tumalo was too weak to nurse, so Marcus had to use a special small tube to deliver milk into his stomach. This was a process requiring absolute precision. Just one small mistake, the liquid could go into the lungs instead of the stomach, causing pneumonia and immediate death. Marcus's hands, accustomed to bandaging wounds for adult hippos weighing tons, now trembled as he inserted the thin tube into Tumalo's mouth. Every 90 minutes he performed this procedure, day and night without rest. The alarm clock rang continuously, and each time he woke up, Marcus's heart raced with fear. He would rush to Tumalo's side, heart pounding, and breathe a sigh of relief when he saw the tiny chest still rising and falling, though the movements were barely noticeable. "Come on, little warrior," he whispered while gently wiping Tumalo's small body with a warm, damp cloth, mimicking how a mother hippo would care for her young. "I know you're a strong warrior." Every few hours, Marcus carefully moved Tumalo to the shallow pool, supporting his tiny body in the lukewarm water. Hippos needed water not just for drinking but for their skin. Without regular immersion, their sensitive skin would crack and become infected. These water sessions were critical yet terrifying. Tumalo was so weak he could barely keep his nostrils above water, and Marcus had to hold him constantly, cradling the miniature hippo with infinite care. On the third day, when the morning sunlight gently shone through the greenhouse roof, Marcus woke up to find Tumalo lying motionless, body temperature alarmingly low. Panic swept through him. He quickly took Tumalo into his arms, using his own body heat to warm the hippo calf. He carefully dropped glucose onto Tumalo's gums and waited, heart pounding. That moment seemed to last forever. The room was so quiet Marcus could hear the clock ticking and his own heartbeat. Then, a small movement, a weak snort came from Tumalo. It was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. That was the turning point. From that day forward, Tumalo gradually became healthier. First, his body temperature stabilized without constant heating. Then he began nursing from a bottle instead of being fed through a tube. Each step forward, however small, was a great victory. When news of Marcus's actions spread throughout the reserve, many colleagues initially showed skepticism, even criticism. They considered it an emotional act, a futile effort. But when Tumalo survived after 1 week, then 2 weeks, their attitude began to change. Many began to visit, bringing advice, equipment, and support. Among them, Leah Schmidt, a young, passionate aquatic zoologist with flaming red hair and bright blue eyes, became Marcus's most important supporter. With updated knowledge about nutrition and hippo calf care, she helped adjust Tumalo's diet, added essential supplements, and monitored his development. In the first weeks, the relationship between Marcus and Leah was mainly professional. Two people sharing concern about Tumalo's health condition, discussing diet and care schedules. But gradually, as Tumalo grew stronger, they began sharing more about themselves. Marcus told about his deceased wife, Sarah, a wildlife conservationist who had sacrificed her life in an anti-poaching operation 10 years ago. Leah shared about her childhood dream to become an advocate for the rights of voiceless creatures. Evening sessions at the greenhouse, when Tumalo was sleeping soundly in his small pool, became treasured moments. They often sat outside under Botswana's star-filled sky, drinking herbal tea and discussing Tumalo's future and other conservation projects. The relationship between them, a friendship based on respect and common goals, became a source of strength for both. In quiet moments watching Tumalo sleep, Marcus sometimes wondered whether his decision was too much interference with nature. But then he remembered how humans had impacted hippos' habitat and fate. Habitat loss from dam construction, water pollution, poaching for their ivory-like teeth, climate change affecting water sources. In that context, his action was not interference with nature, but a humble effort to rebalance what humans had taken from nature. When Tumalo turned 1 month old, a significant change had occurred. His tiny body began regaining strength. The pinkish-gray skin that was once wrinkled and sagging now became taut and more vibrant, developing the healthy sheen that indicated proper hydration. His eyes, once dim and lifeless in the first days, now brightened with curiosity and playfulness. Each morning, Tumalo greeted Marcus with a cheerful little grunt and head bobbing, a gesture that had become their morning ritual. News about the world's smallest hippo began spreading beyond Okavango Delta Reserve. Initially, it was just whispers among conservationists and reserve staff. But then a local journalist named Jessica Mbeki, who regularly wrote about environmental issues and wildlife conservation for the Botswana Gazette, heard about the story and asked permission to visit Tumalo. Marcus was initially hesitant. He worried that media attention could cause pressure and stress for Tumalo during his critical development phase. But Leah convinced him that a positive article could help raise awareness about hippo conditions and might even attract funding for Okavango Delta, which was facing financial difficulties and the threat of closure. After much consideration, Marcus agreed to a short interview and photo session with strict conditions about not using flash and maintaining a safe distance from Tumalo. Jessica complied with all regulations and wrote a profound article focusing not only on Tumalo's miracle but also on broader conservation efforts and the difficult situation of African hippos in general. Her article, titled Little Miracle, The Survival Battle of the World's Smallest Hippo, became an online phenomenon, shared millions of times on social media platforms. The image of Tumalo with his tiny body standing next to Marcus's high boot for size comparison touched readers' hearts worldwide. Soon, Okavango Delta became the center of attention. Television stations, journalists, and even documentary filmmakers from National Geographic and BBC all wanted to record Tumalo's story. Donations from individuals, conservation organizations, and businesses poured in from around the world. Everyone wanted to know more about Tumalo, wanted to see him, wanted to be part of this miraculous story. Robert Quincade, who had been skeptical about Marcus's decision, now had to admit that the Tumalo effect had saved Okavango Delta's financial situation. With new funding, they could not only continue operating but also expand the hippo conservation program, hire more anti-poaching staff, and invest in research and education. But along with fame came new challenges. Marcus worried about the pressure and stress that constant attention could cause Tumalo. He also feared that Tumalo was becoming more of a display object than a wild creature in the recovery process. The situation became more complex when Hendrik van der Merwe, a wealthy businessman and owner of an animal entertainment park chain, proposed a large investment in Okavango Delta with the condition that Tumalo would become the main attraction of a new exhibition area where visitors could take photos and interact with him. This proposal caused a heated debate among the reserve management. Robert and some board members supported this idea, believing that the funding could ensure Okavango Delta's long-term future. But Marcus and Leah firmly opposed it, arguing that it would harm Tumalo's natural development process and the ultimate goal, reintegrating him into the wild world. After many tense meetings, some held in the reserve's meeting room, others in the outdoor courtyard where staff gathered for important decisions, Marcus proposed a compromise solution, a remote observation area where visitors could see Tumalo and other animals through one-way glass and cameras without disturbing or stressing them. This area would be combined with an education center where visitors could learn about conservation work, human impact on hippo habitats, and how everyone could help. Hendrik reluctantly accepted this proposal, and with his financial support, Okavango Delta began building the Tumalo Hippo Education and Conservation Center, a space designed to inspire and educate rather than merely entertain. Meanwhile, Marcus and Leah increasingly worried about Tumalo's social development. At 3 months old, Tumalo had become too accustomed to humans and lacked interaction with his own kind. Although he was developing well physically, he needed to learn the social skills and natural behaviors of hippos, which humans could not teach. Marcus decided it was time to begin the reintegration process, helping Tumalo learn to become a real hippo by allowing him to interact with other hippos. This was a difficult decision, as it meant Marcus would gradually withdraw from Tumalo's daily life, something neither was emotionally ready for. This process was complex and challenging. They built a special area in the reserve where Tumalo could safely interact with other hippos. This area included a series of connected pools and muddy banks, carefully designed with safety barriers for Tumalo but still allowing interaction through gaps permitting hippos to smell and touch each other through the water. Initially, the large hippos showed indifference or even hostility toward Tumalo. He was too small, too different, and carried the scent of humans. Some large bull hippos even showed aggression, their massive jaws opening in threat displays, forcing Marcus and Leah to quickly remove Tumalo from the area. The first attempts ended in tears, not only from Tumalo, but also from Marcus himself, who had to witness the fear and rejection Tumalo faced. But then something unexpected happened. Duma, an elderly female hippo who had lived in the reserve for many years after being rescued from drought-stricken waters, began showing interest in Tumalo. Duma, about 45 years old, had lost several of her offspring to predators and disease and had never lived in a natural hippopod. Perhaps because of this, she had special empathy for Tumalo. Initially, she just floated near the barrier, looking at the hippo calf with curiosity. Then she began reaching through the water gap, gently touching Tumalo with her snout. These gestures, though simple, excited Marcus and Leah immensely. These were the first signs of Tumalo being accepted. They patiently continued the familiarization process each day, extending the time Tumalo spent near Duma. And finally, after nearly 2 weeks, when they allowed Tumalo into the same pool with Duma, the old hippo gently nuzzled the hippo calf, submerging slightly to let him rest against her massive flank, as if welcoming a long-lost child home. Tumalo, after a moment of initial hesitation, responded by pressing against Duma, seeking warmth and protection in the cool water. Marcus stood outside the pool area, tears streaming down his face. It was a beautiful moment, but also bittersweet. He knew it was time to let go. From now on, Duma would be Tumalo's mother, teaching him things no human could teach: how to navigate river currents, how to communicate through underwater vocalizations, how to find the best grazing spots at night, how to survive in the wild world of the Delta. In the following days and weeks, Marcus had to adjust to his new role. No longer the primary caregiver but an observer from afar, he still visited Tumalo daily but kept his distance, allowing Tumalo and Duma to build their own bond. It was a painful but necessary process, not only for Tumalo but also for Marcus himself. Leah, noticing Marcus's sadness, spent more time with him. They often sat together in the observation room, watching Tumalo and Duma through one-way glass as they basked in the shallow pools, taking notes on Tumalo's progress and discussing the next steps in his reintegration process. In such quiet moments, the bond between Marcus and Leah also deepened. Their friendship, originating from shared concern for Tumalo, gradually developed into a more complex relationship. They began having dinner together in the courtyard of Marcus's house, discussing not only Tumalo but also their lives, dreams, and hopes. Marcus, who had closed himself off after his wife's death, gradually opened up more, finding unexpected joy in conversations with Leah. And Leah, who had always admired Marcus for his knowledge and dedication, began seeing him in a new way, not just as a mentor, but as someone with whom she could build a future. In the following months, Tumalo gradually integrated with the hippopod under Duma's guidance. He learned to communicate with other hippos through grunts, snorts, and underwater sounds. Learned to find the best grazing areas at night when hippos leave the water to feed. Learned to use his mouth more effectively, though it was still comically small compared to adult hippos. Although still much smaller than hippos his age, Tumalo compensated with his agility. He could swim faster, squeeze into smaller spaces in the reed beds, and navigate shallow channels that larger hippos avoided. Meanwhile, the Tumalo Hippo Education and Conservation Center had opened and quickly became a popular destination for tourists and students. The educational programs designed by Leah and a team of environmental educators helped raise awareness about the critical situation of African hippos, threatened by habitat loss, water pollution, and illegal hunting, and the importance of conservation work. The most important part of the center was the camera and screen system that allowed visitors to observe Tumalo and other hippos without disturbing them. Images of Tumalo, now much larger but still significantly smaller than hippos his age, along with Duma and gradually with the entire hippopod, provided a rare glimpse into the complex social world of hippos. With support from international conservation organizations and local universities, Okavango Delta also began a long-term research program on hippo behavior, with Tumalo and Duma as primary subjects. Leah, with her solid academic background, became the head of this project, working with researchers from around the world. A particularly interesting discovery emerged during the research process. Tumalo seemed to display a special ability in interacting with other animal species. First, researchers noticed he often floated near the edges of the hippo pools, close to areas where crocodiles, waterbuck, and even elephants came to drink, as if observing and learning. But then an unexpected event proved this special ability. A young lechwe antelope, fleeing from a predator, plunged into the hippo pool. A dangerous move, as hippos often attack intruders. While other hippos reacted with wariness or aggression, their massive jaws opening in warning, Tumalo gently approached the terrified antelope, carefully positioned himself between the lechwe and the other hippos, and seemed to be creating a safe corridor. Then Tumalo guided the antelope to the shallow bank where reserve staff were waiting to ensure it could safely exit. This incident amazed Marcus and Leah. They began conducting controlled observations, monitoring Tumalo's reactions when other species approached the water. Every time, Tumalo displayed remarkable gentleness and understanding, as if he understood the vulnerability other creatures experienced near the water, the life-giving resource that was also a place of danger. Leah recorded these observations in a scientific paper proposing the hypothesis that Tumalo's initial experience as a rejected runt hippo had helped him develop a special kind of emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize and empathize with other creatures' suffering. This paper attracted significant attention in the scientific community and led to a series of new studies on emotional intelligence in hippos and other large aquatic mammal species. Tumalo, the tiny hippo who had almost not survived his first night, was now changing how humans understood the animal world. Time passed quickly at Okavango Delta. In the following year, Tumalo became an integral part of reserve life. Not only a tourist attraction, he also became an inspiration for conservationists and wildlife researchers worldwide. Although still much smaller than hippos his age, about half the size of a normal hippo, Tumalo had developed into a healthy individual with a unique and lively personality. His small body allowed him to move with amazing agility and flexibility in the water. He could navigate through dense reed beds, access shallow channels that large hippos couldn't reach, and perform quick turns underwater that other hippos couldn't do. His smaller mouth meant he had to be more selective and creative in his grazing, but he compensated with determination and intelligence. Tumalo also developed a special skill in using his mouth and lips with unusual precision. While hippo mouths are typically used mainly for grazing, threat displays, and fighting, Tumalo learned to manipulate objects with surprising delicacy. He could pick up small fruits that fell into the water, gently move obstacles, and even learn to open simple latches on gates. He enjoyed playing with floating objects, creating small waves that delighted visitors watching from the observation center. But Tumalo's most outstanding characteristic remained his ability to interact with other animal species. Under Leah's guidance and that of other researchers, Okavango Delta developed a special program using Tumalo as a bridge with injured or orphaned animals newly brought to the reserve. The process worked as follows. When a new animal, especially an injured or frightened young one, was brought to the reserve, it was usually placed in a small recovery area near Tumalo's residence. After being stabilized by veterinarians, it was allowed to approach the water's edge where Tumalo could be present. In most cases, Tumalo's calm and gentle presence helped soothe these frightened animals, helping them adapt faster to their new environment and respond better to treatment and recovery processes. The Tumalo's Haven program officially formalized this method and expanded it as part of the recovery procedure at Okavango Delta. A special area was built where Tumalo could safely interact with many different animal species. This area included wetland spaces designed for different species, with carefully managed water levels and natural barriers allowing controlled interaction. Visitors could observe this process from afar through a sophisticated camera system connected to screens at the Tumalo Hippo Education and Conservation Center. This experience was not only entertaining but also deeply educational, showing the complexity of the animal world and the importance of compassion and interspecies understanding. Leah, as head of research, wrote a series of scientific papers on this phenomenon, raising many interesting questions about hippos' emotional intelligence and interspecies communication abilities. Her work attracted attention from leading scientists worldwide, leading to many research collaborations and an international conference held at Okavango Delta. Marcus, meanwhile, gradually withdrew from daily work at the reserve. At age 61, after 4 decades of service, he felt it was time to let the younger generation like Leah take over. He moved to an advisory role, spending more time at his home on the reserve's edge, tending his courtyard garden and writing memoirs about his life working with aquatic wildlife. But although partially retired, Marcus still maintained a regular schedule to visit Tumalo. Each morning, he walked around the reserve, stopping at the Hippo pool area to spend time with Tumalo. Although Tumalo had now fully integrated with the Hippo pod and had a close relationship with Duma, he always recognized Marcus, rushing through the water to the edge when he saw him appear, lifting his head to touch Marcus's outstretched hand in an affectionate gesture, careful not to open his mouth, as even a small hippo's bite could be dangerous. The relationship between Marcus and Leah also developed over time, from colleagues to friends, then to something deeper. At age 35, Leah was still much younger than Marcus, but the age difference no longer mattered when they shared so much in common: love for wild animals, dedication to conservation work, and especially special affection for Tumalo. When Tumalo turned 2 years old, an important milestone that initially no one thought he could reach, Marcus proposed to Leah on a quiet afternoon by the Delta Waterway, witnessed by a pod of hippos basking in the evening sun. She said yes, and their simple wedding took place 3 months later in the courtyard of the reserve's main building, with a special guest, Tumalo, allowed to be present in a specially prepared shallow pool nearby, grunting contentedly throughout the ceremony. The Tumalo Hippo Education and Conservation Center continued to develop, becoming a model for reserves and conservation areas throughout Africa. Their approach, focusing on education, research, and conservation rather than mere entertainment, was adopted and adapted by many places to suit their needs. Okavango Delta, once on the brink of bankruptcy, had now developed into a leading conservation and research center, with exchange programs with universities and conservation organizations worldwide. Hendrik van der Merwe, who initially only cared about turning Tumalo into a tourist attraction, also changed his perspective and became a major sponsor for the reserve's conservation programs. But Tumalo's own future remained an unanswered question. Although he had adapted well to reserve life and integrated with the hippopod, Tumalo was still a wild creature. Marcus and Leah always believed the ultimate goal must be to give Tumalo the opportunity to live the most natural life possible, ideally in a wild environment. But there were several complicating factors. Tumalo's small size, though much larger now but still only half that of a normal adult hippo, could make him vulnerable to aggressive territorial bulls or large crocodiles in completely wild settings. Moreover, Tumalo had developed special relationships with many other animal species at Okavango Delta, and severing these bonds could cause psychological trauma. After months of consideration and consultation with conservation experts and animal behavior specialists, Marcus and Leah decided that Tumalo would not be completely released into the wild. Instead, they developed a semi-free plan. Tumalo and his close hippopod, including Duma and several other hippos, would be moved to a much larger conservation area where they could live almost naturally but still receive protection and monitoring. The chosen area was Chobe National Park, a vast conservation area in northern Botswana where hippos and many other wild animal species had been protected for decades. With over 11,000 square kilometers of rivers, floodplains, and grasslands, this was an ideal habitat for hippos, providing enough space, water, and grazing areas. Moving Tumalo and his close hippopod to Chobe became a major project, supported by the Botswana government and many international conservation organizations. A special area was established within the national park, with a small research station allowing scientists to continue monitoring Tumalo's progress and studying his behavior. On a fresh spring morning, as Marcus sat on his courtyard porch reading the newspaper and enjoying his morning coffee as usual, he heard a familiar sound: hippo grunting, heavy footsteps, the splash of water. He looked up and saw a convoy of vehicles from the reserve approaching his house. And in a specially designed transport pool on a large truck, visible through the transparent sides, was Tumalo. The hippo, though still smaller than other hippos, was now a healthy adult hippo. The truck stopped near Marcus's gate, and staff carefully opened the viewing panel. Tumalo's eyes found Marcus immediately, and he let out a familiar grunt, the same greeting sound from all those mornings years ago. Leah stepped out of the lead vehicle, a radiant smile on her face. She didn't need to say much. Marcus understood this was the farewell visit. Tomorrow, Tumalo and his pod would be moved to Chobe, beginning a new chapter in their lives. Marcus slowly walked to the transport pool and placed his hand against the transparent barrier. Tumalo pressed his snout against it from the other side. Without words, they understood each other. In Tumalo's deep eyes, Marcus saw gratitude, joy, and deep affection. And in that moment, he knew that every sleepless night, every drop of sweat and tears, had been worth it. "Go on, little boy," Marcus whispered gently. "It's time for you to find your own path." As the convoy prepared to leave, Leah hugged Marcus tightly. "We have wonderful news," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "The observation team has confirmed it. A female hippo named Nala in Tumalo's pod is pregnant, and all signs indicate Tumalo is the father." Marcus stood there, stunned by the news. Tumalo, the tiny creature no one thought would survive his first night, was now about to have a family of his own. The circle of life, which he had boldly intervened in, was now continuing exactly as nature intended. 6 months later, Marcus and Leah visited Tumalo at Chobe. Traveling over 600 kilometers from Okavango Delta, they arrived on a beautiful morning, warmly welcomed by local researchers. They were taken to the observation station where they could see Tumalo's hippopod leisurely floating in the broad river. And there, beside Tumalo and Nala in the shallow water near the bank, was a newborn hippo calf, a small but healthy creature staying close to its mother's massive flank. "She's only 2 weeks old," a researcher explained. "We've named her Tumalo, meaning hope." Marcus and Leah stood silently, hand in hand, watching the scene before them with deep amazement and emotion. Tumalo, the tiny hippo Marcus had saved from the brink of death, had now become a father, beginning a new generation. And not only that, he continued his role as peacemaker among species, often seen floating calmly near the water's edge while zebras, antelopes, and even elephants drank nearby, his presence somehow creating a zone of peace that other animals recognized and trusted. Researchers at Chobe continued the work Leah had begun at Okavango Delta, studying hippos' emotional intelligence and interspecies communication abilities. This work led to many breakthrough discoveries about hippo cognition and emotions, contributing to efforts to conserve these magnificent creatures. On the way back to Okavango Delta, Marcus and Leah stopped at an observation point, looking out over Botswana's vast waterways. The sun was setting, painting the sky a brilliant orange and reflecting off the delta's channels like liquid gold. Marcus embraced Leah, feeling a peace he had never known in many years. "Sometimes," he whispered, "the most extraordinary thing a person can do is simply never give up hope." And as they stood there under Africa's vast sky, Marcus knew that his true legacy was not just saving one life, but changing how people see the world around them. Through Tumalo, he had taught thousands of people about the power of compassion, about the value of every life, regardless of size or shape. And in an increasingly divided world, that was perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. The story of Tumalo, the smallest hippo ever known, became a legend told through many generations, inspiring countless people to continue fighting for a world where humans and animals can coexist harmoniously, where every life is cherished, and where hope is never lost.